I'm going to give you 6 minutes. And I'm gonna, let's see, I'll give you 6 minutes. I'm gonna do 7 breakout rooms, so that'll be probably about 3 to a room. Might be 2. I'll give you 6 minutes. So everybody just go around and share, then if you complete that sharing, then just have a conversation about that definition, and I'll throw the definition in the chat. Are there any clarifying questions about what I've asked you to think about? You're really only using the definition we just heard Jennifer read as your prompt for action inquiry. We'll talk about it when you come back. Okay, I'm going to open up all the rooms, give you about 6 minutes. Angela, are you in a room? Or, oh, there you go. Okay. Everyone should be coming back.
Nothing for them to help you with. Yeah, it's got it.
All right. Any-
Hold on. We look.
Anybody have something they want to share from that experience? Just the conversation you had?
I'll share. Our group discussed about how teachers, or we as teachers, we reflect all the time. And so because of a lot of the reflection practices that we have, we're always doing something with what we gained from our reflection.
Yeah.
And so we feel like that's a lot of action-based research anyway, because we started something, we did a practice, we reflected on that practice, and then we went about some change. So we feel like it's embedded heavily in our role.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm guessing too, Jasmine, that, with Drew doing professional learning communities pretty actively, that's a good space in which that kind of reflection probably evolved and has developed, and probably particularly as being, with strong team members. Yeah, I could see where you do a lot of that. Yeah. And that is an example of action inquiry. Yep. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll share.
Yeah.
I discussed in my group. We talked, well, I kind of shared my experience as being a general ed teacher and then shifting to a special education teacher. So being like in the course lead or having my classroom to now taking a shift to being a co-teacher. For me, that was kind of major for me.
Yeah.
To share the space,
Yeah.
to plan, and just to kind of still go as one. That was kind of, because I was used to just kind of taking the lead and just going,
Yeah.
and having to take a partnership approach was really a stretch for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a really good personal example of that, right? Where you have a heat experience that you really took on something different, and it causes you to have to change your perspective and do things differently, or your awareness builds. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Thank you, Marcella. That's great. All right, well, let me go back to sharing my screen. So now, I mean, most likely through your conversations, you have a pretty good sense already of this idea of action inquiry. And as you pointed out, we all do this in some capacity. We all do this in some way that helps us understand ourselves, helps us grow, moves us forward in our work. Here's just a quick example. And it represents a kind of continuous example. So if you look at the pictures, when I'm a young kid and I learn how to ride a bike, my original awareness, this first person, me, territory, is I can ride a bike. I feel good about myself. If I stay in that world of thinking about a bike, my second person territory, that is where I start to grow now, is not only do I see I can ride a bike, but guess what? When I work with my friends and I go out on social weekends with my friends, I now enjoy riding a bike with others. And I'm still a good bike rider. So I'm expanding my awareness of what biking means to me in my life. Then I continue to grow, and I'm a finder of a bike co-op. I start a new business. Not only can I ride a bike, not only do I enjoy going out on bike riding, but I also enjoy helping other people learn about their bikes. And then in the fourth territory, my continued level of growing is in this sort of fourth person territory, where now I not only enjoy the work I'm doing as an entrepreneur, but I can see the difference it's making in the world, because I started a nonprofit and I'm devoting my resources to building bikes for underserved communities and giving them to kids in underserved communities. So this represents that growth we undergo, and it's an inquiry that I'm going through as I develop in my life, but it's also actions I'm taking all along the way. It's like the action that Marcella took when she took on a new role, or the action that you take in your PLCs when you say, you know, that math lesson we did last week on this concept just didn't go well because not many kids understood it. So we have to go back and reteach it. If you put it through the lens of you as a teacher, I can be an effective teacher as first territory. I am an effective teacher because I love working with kids as second territory. I enjoy being a grade level lead, seeing my team members succeed. So now I've expanded more. And then finally, my work as a teacher and a grade level lead is helping Drew realize its mission as a school. So now I've expanded myself to the whole system. So that represents this concept of continuous action inquiry and growing in the work we do. Another way to think about this is if the thing we want in our life are results, we want an outcome, we want to become the best teacher possible, or we want to become the most effective staff member in human relations as possible, then we can talk about this through what's called different levels of awareness. Single loop learning or single level awareness is where I change an action to address a particular error I've made. Right? So I taught this lesson in math. It didn't go well. I'm going to reteach it tomorrow. That's an awareness at a single loop level. Double loop learning or double loop awareness is where now I notice, gee, I didn't teach this math lesson well. And I realized the reason is because I was on the center of the stage too much. I didn't involve kids enough. Now I've got to go back and change my whole practice as to how I think about teaching. That's double loop learning when I'm changing a strategy and not just correcting an error. And then triple loop learning or triple loop awareness is when I'm thinking, you know, this way we teach math at Drew is just not working. This Singapore math is not the ideal way to teach math. We've got to rethink our whole purpose. The fifth grade has to teach math in a whole new way. Now I'm thinking about the system. So when we're doing action inquiry, we're going from ourselves as learners all the way back and integrating ourselves into the system and seeing that we serve a system and that our improvement and the things we want to work on not only helps us grow, but helps the system become better. I'm going to skip this slide because just for time, because I want to give you time to do this. What I'd like you to do now, let me ask this. Let me just do one thing before I go here. And that is just in those two slides, does that conjure up a question that you have about maybe this idea of action inquiry based on your breakout, based on those two slides? What is there something that you want me to kind of just clarify or enhance a little bit? A curiosity that maybe comes up.
I have one. I don't know if this was answered before, but do you ever slide from like one to another, or are you ever simultaneously more than one at the same time, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's David. Yeah, David, that's a good question. I think the idea in action inquiry is to have curiosity and wonderment about the things that we're engaged in, and use that curiosity or that inquiry as a springboard for action, for making a change. And building that into our routine in life so we're doing it continuously. Does that mean we will? No. You know, I may have an inquiry about my teaching, and I may try an action to change how I teach, but then I might slip into a kind of default way of behaving for the month of April and May, because all I'm doing is preparing my kids for the end of year test, and I can't really think about changing anything. I just got to kind of push forward. So I don't think it's something that the goal would be to continuously do it, but life gets in the way, and you know, we constantly have interruptions. So we're waxing and waning a bit. But the goal would be to try to get to the point that you're aware of enough about yourself to do it on a regular basis and force yourself into a kind of be intentional about growing and not just have it come circumstantially or something. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. But that's great. I mean, that's a good question. Because it seems it's idealistic to think about it happening continuously. Yeah, good. Any other just reflections or thoughts about this idea? Bill Torbert, who's that article you read back in the beginning, The 7 Transformations of Leadership, he wrote a whole book on action inquiry. So we're really fast tracking it. But I think it makes enough sense that we can use it as a springboard for what I'm going to ask you to do in the next couple of weeks before our last meeting, to try to put this into some real particular action. Any other insights, questions, reflections on that?
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, you know, if we feel like we're kind of in a transformative place, do you think that it's better if we have an angle with action inquiry that is more personal, or do you think it should be more professional?
You know, there's no right answer to that question. That's a great question. I think you decide. I mean, so for example, let's say that you have 2 inquiries. One is you really, as you think about how you show up when you go to meetings, you're wondering, I really don't feel like I'm fully present in a meeting. I feel like I'm easily distracted, and I really want to work on changing that personal way I show up. Or you might have another inquiry that's, you know, my team is really upset at the fact that the principal is asking us to always do this checklist of stuff. And I really want to do something more substantial, something more meaningful in our PLC. Which do I choose? Which do I work on? Do I work on a system thing or a personal thing? If I were in the midst of answering that question, I'd probably want to work on the personal thing. Because the personal thing, if I become better at it, if I can really grow in that way, then it feels like that will impact my team things and my school things more than if I just quickly go into the school thing. That would be my answer to your question. But I think it's a personal choice, really. The fact that you engage in the inquiry and you try to get better and you experiment and you work on actions, behaviors, is the important thing.
Because I do have a concern. That was a question I had too, was, and it almost would have to be more personal for me, because systematically being in my position, I can't make those changes.
Yeah.
Or even introduce those changes without being able to follow the process all the way through. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Burnett. Yeah, it does. And you know, the thing that I hear all the time, and I'll reflect back to you, is you can't change the system if you're not willing to change yourself. So we can't have our team get better. We can't have our school get better if we're not willing to change ourselves and help and engage in ourselves getting better at what we want to do and how we want to show up. So I always think it's helpful to default to the personal before you get into the team and the system. But sometimes, you know, you feel like you understand yourself well enough in something that you really need to move forward with the team, or you need to move forward with the system because it's more compelling to you. But
Not
yeah,
just compelling to me, but it can be more compelling to the system.
yeah, right, right.
But you're still limited in what impact that you can put yourself out there to impact the system.
Yes. And yes, I think you're right. And sometimes the system is more powerfully impacted by a group of people working together than any one person, right? That might be what you're also leading towards? Change the team to change the school, you know, because then if we're together, we have more of an impact. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's an interesting thing to think about and to mull over. Yeah, good. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do. Let's see here. Let me come back and share my screen. Where am I here? Okay. All right, what I'd like you to do is for I guess we're at 2:45. So for about 7 minutes, roughly 7 to 8 minutes, I want you to think about something right now in your own work at Drew that over the next couple of weeks, you want to spend time to work on. It might be like we were talking about with Jessica when she asked her question, a way of showing up. It might be an opportunity you have that you want to make yourself available to. It might be a challenge you're facing somewhere on your team, in your department, on your grade level. I want you to think about that, and I want you to just write down some notes, or you can really mull this over in your head. What actions will you want to kind of take to work on this inquiry, right? And so this 8 minutes is a very quick brainstorm prototype. All right. And you can flush it out in more detail later, but this is what you're going to work on over the next 2 weeks. And after 8 minutes, we'll come back to a whole group. And if you want to share what you're going to work on, that's fine. We'll see if we can take 2 or 3 or 4 of them and just get an idea of what people are thinking about. All right. And because sometimes to make this thing you're going to work on visible to others helps you be accountable to yourself to actually do it. Okay, so take 8 minutes. You can go off camera. I'll call you back. Stay where you are and keep yourself aware because I'll call you back after about 7 or 8 minutes. Okay? Take another minute. All right, you want to come, if you come back on screen for a little bit, what I'd ask, this isn't a process of share or die. And we probably don't have time. I mean, it'd be great to hear what everybody's thinking and getting feedback on it, but does anybody have something they want to just test in the whole group to just share with us what you're thinking about and get some feedback?
I don't know if it was about share, if it's something you're specifically looking for, but I
Yeah,
hope to show up more as a reflective listener and not just a voice, but behavior and emotion, and how that looks as being an active listener by listening not just at the voice, but to body language and emotions, and putting myself in a different perspective by putting myself in someone else's shoes and restating what they're actually saying and being more present. So a lot of
Yeah.
times I don't know if it's ageism, but usually I used to be able to listen to two things and do one thing and listen to something else. I can't do that anymore.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great one. And you know what I would suggest, Bernita, is to think a little bit about how are you going to know you're doing it. So, you know, and maybe it's through journaling, maybe it's through going, you know, you're in a meeting and after the meeting, you're going to go to two people randomly and see them the next day and ask them to give you feedback on how you showed up in the meeting. What did they see from your participation? So think a little bit about how you might collect evidence. And the idea is you're just trying experiments. You're going to try things out to become a deeper, better, more engaged listener, to have more presence in the experiences you have, right? You might read an article on something about how you show up at a meeting, how to do that well. So whatever it is you do, just sort of think about how you're going to record that too. Great, that's great. So that's an idea of action inquiry, right? You're inquiring, you're wondering, you're figuring out, how am I going to do this and what behaviors am I going to change to get there? Yeah. And is that Jasmine? Did you put that in the chat, Jasmine? Use of structured mini
Yeah.
lessons, proper use of think aloud. Is that you?
Yes, so I had 3 ideas. I was going to talk about just looking at the key components of a mini lesson and why they're all important when you're in the classroom. Using think alouds appropriately to develop metacognition, and then teaching kids how to be aware of their data so that they can drive their own instruction. So like going into personalized learning.
Yeah. And again, I think with yours, what I might just suggest is those are great. So you're going to go out there and try to be more intentional about these items within this context of your own teaching. You might think about how you're going to collect evidence. maybe you're gonna set up your iPad in the corner and videotape one of your lessons, and then look at it and give yourself some feedback on how do you think you showed up? How well did you do that? Or you're going to ask a team member if they can get a sub in to just come into one of your classes and watch you teach. So think a little bit about how you'll collect evidence that those things you want to do are happening. That might be just, again, a challenge to put before yourself. But that's great. That's a great idea. Okay, so we've got a couple thoughts, right, from two of our colleagues here about what they're going to do. That should at least frame what action inquiry is going to look like. You're running experiments. What I'd also sort of encourage you to think about, let's see, where is my screen? Sorry. Let me come out of that. Let's see here. Where am I? Oh, there we go. All right. So what I'd like you to think about is as we heard from both Jasmine and from Bernita, this idea of what they're going to do, try to enter into your inquiry with a beginner's mindset. That is, I know how to show up at a meeting. I know how to listen. That's not the beginner's mindset. I wonder how I should show up at a meeting to be a better listener. So that beginner's mindset is trying to go into it with curiosity as opposed to having known it. You have these slides so you can look at them a little better. How to develop a beginner's mindset. Here are some examples. Avoid prejudgment. Get curious about channeling your sort of your inner 5-year-old, the 5-year-old who goes out and looks at everything and asks why. Get rid of your extra arrows. What if I had only done this? Or detach from your ego. Those are things that allow you to kind of enter this inquiry from a beginner's mindset. That's what you want to try to do. Okay? Now, I'm not going to, since we're at the very end, I was hoping to do this quick survey. So because I had you all captured and we could get 100% participation. But since we're at time, I'm not going to do it. I'll send it to you and I'll prompt you to do it and hope I get 50% of you. And if we're lucky, I'll get 100%. All right. Let me stop sharing for a minute and just final thoughts or a closing remark from anyone? So what you're going to do over the next 2 weeks before our last meeting, and I'll send you something later, a little later, is you're going to take your inquiry. You only had 7 minutes to build it out. So build it out a little more. Think about what you're going to do or what you're going to experiment with. Go out and test it. You've got 2 weeks. You've got really a week because you're on spring break. So maybe you want to take an inquiry that's really going to be more personal, like something you do in your family or something, the way you show up as a mother or a parent or how you show up as a friend. It doesn't really matter as long as you're doing the action inquiry. And then in 2 weeks when we meet, I'm going to ask us to just share the experiences we had and ask you to kind of come to the meeting with a willingness to kind of put yourself out there. And whether you're successful or you're not, it really isn't that important. What's important is that you try. All right? Is everybody willing to give that a shot? Yeah? Okay. All right. You guys have a good break and a good weekend and a good break. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks for our last gathering. And look for that little prompt to do a quick questionnaire. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
So next year he's in pre-K.
So next year will be